So recently there's been a lot of talking about the environmental impacts that Canada has on the world, cutting the oil sands, lowering the carbon emissions that's coming out of Canada and all that. And it's got me kind of wondering, what is the actual output that Canada emits compared to the rest of the world? So I got got a few tabs open here. And to start off, just kind of note I'm using this one is from the Ivy League. And this was written back in, I think it was 2016. I have a more recent tab here, but just to kind of give you guys a broad outlook of Canada compared to the rest of the world. These are the total gas emissions output back in 2012. This is China. Ignore these two panels because these are what the target emissions are going to be in 2020 and 2030. I have no idea why they said China should go up by what looks like, I don't know, 3 billion pounds. Let's see. Metric tons. Yeah, okay. So to go up by 3 million metric tons by 2020. Or sorry. Yeah, actually 2020. What the heck? Then you can see where the states was at. Here, there's India. Then you have the smaller areas. You have Germany, Mexico, Australia, and then Canada. Where does Canada sit at? Well, back in 2012, it sat at about, if I had to guess, 750. So basically, the point I want to put out here is people said it's okay for China to have, what is it, about 4 Canada's worth of emissions from 2012 to 2020, and yet they want Canada to lower their emissions by, it looks like 50 metric tons. This is some weird math here. Now, I posted on YouTube comment about this, and I think the only reason why anybody's making such a big deal when it comes to Canada is because per person, that's when the numbers start to flip. You can see Australia per person, what they emit is pretty high. Canada ranks third, this is back in 2012, mind you. And then China, because of their population density, comes in at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at 6th place. So, for their population, very low. So, yeah. And the point I want to get across is, does this make sense, kind of thing? Like, does it make sense to lower Canada's emissions so drastically from what the NDP, the Green Party, the Liberals have been pushing? Because it's like, how much can you really shave off from here? Like, if they say we want to shave off like 10%, it's like, okay, 70 metric tons, that's about where we agreed upon, so we were going to do that anyways. But when you look at China, if you said China needs to shave off like 10%, that's like 1 billion metric tons. That's pretty significant if you look at those numbers. And so the next panel here is just kind of showing a more updated one. So in 2017, you can see in terms of global emissions. Over here, Canada was ranked at, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Around the 7th place-ish. So we've kind of moved down to like number 10 spot within those 5 years. We're only pushing out about a total of 573 metric tons, which according to this, Canada has now hit their goal. They've hit their 2030 goal that was supposed to happen, if we trust this number. It's like, Canada's fine. We already fulfilled our quota. We can just sit back, relax, have a margarita, and that's what I want to get at. It's like, why is there so much concern on the environment based around Canada here? Now, maybe the numbers are fudged up. I don't really know. I'm using other people's numbers. I haven't looked or delved too deep into it. Next part I want to go here is part of the climate transparency that Canada's trying to go through. And there's some good information here that I just want to point out. The first being here is, was it this one? No, next panel here. Yeah, so the energy mix that we're seeing in Canada here. Back in 2018, we saw about 5% coal, 34% was oil, 37% was gas. We have some 9% nuclear, if you can read that, and 16% renewable, being the hydro and biomass. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, the reason I bring this up is because, again, our government wants to like cut the oil and gas section just because of pollution. And by that, you're cutting about at least 30% of energy output. That means we have to have, well, we really don't want to use coal. Like, if you want to know the output of coal in terms of CO2 emitted, it's pretty darn high for the energy output. It does a pretty good amount of energy, but it gives off a lot of CO2 compared to natural gases and propane. But the point being that if you want to take out these two sections and like cut them in half, you have to use or have to increase the renewable areas and the nuclear area, basically, which using nuclear, I'm pretty sure a lot of us are very concerned about switching to nuclear power. It is very clean, but if something goes wrong, it goes wrong. And then as for the renewable resources, I think we're kind of capped out at what we can do for hydroelectricity. Yeah, let's see. And so down here we can kind of take a look at the outputs for the biomass. And if you guys don't remember what biomass is, it's basically like trees, corn. I remember corn and some other stuff was used a lot to burn. So basically kind of doing the same thing that coal is supposed to do, but the trade-off being that, because it's a plant-based, it first absorbs all that CO2 before being burned. So supposedly it pays for itself. Let's see, was there anything else in here that I wanted to go through? Okay, yeah. So then they get on to this part about decarbonization and say using the renewable and the power generation here. So let's see here. Yeah, so they want to completely phase out coal, which I agree with. It does output a lot of carbon, but it's like, what do you replace that with? Like, as I said before, that would mean replacing with like nuclear, because solar, we're still not there. Wind power, again, if you're okay with all those bird killings that we keep hearing about, sure, I guess we can improve on the wind power. Biomass, that takes time to grow the plants and then we have to burn it again. So it's kind of at this odd net even scenario. Let's see, is there anything else? Take it from here. No, okay, so that's about all I got for this part here. Might want to reread what this section was trying to do. Next one I want to bring up is a study that was done back in 2016 on September 14th, where it's like the biomass idea may not be as good as we personally believe. First off here, environmental impact of burning biomass for electricity are well documented. When power plants use biomass as fuel, in particular biomass that comes from forests, they can increase carbon emissions compared to coal and other fossil fuels for decades. And that's just kind of how things go, because you're killing the tree that was taking the carbon emission that was being emitted by coals and fossil fuels. So that's what I mean by this weird juggling act. The biomass industry also imperils some of our most precious forests. But this week, it's medical and public health community that's speaking out about the ills of biopower. In a powerful new letter signed by the Allergy and Asthma Network, American Academy of Pediatrics, biomass is far from clean. Burning biomass creates air pollution that causes a sweeping array of health harms, from asthma attacks to cancers to heart attacks, resulting in emergency room visits, hospitalizations, and premature deaths. The group urges members of Congress to protect human health by rejecting policies that drive more biomass burning and supporting the development of truly clean energy such as solar and wind instead. Which, again, there's a lot of trade-offs between using the renewable resources. It's just pick your poison at this point. Safer emissions, a particular matter, soot. If you guys remember Avatar: The Last Airbender, in the waterbender scene, that's what we're talking about. Nitrogen oxide, which contributes to ground level ozone pollution, various carcinogens, and carbon monoxide. It's clear that the air pollution created when power plants burn biomass is toxic and dangerous. Which kind of brings up the question, what does coal release? Like, does coal just release carbon dioxide and a few other things? Because this is the first time I heard about people talk about nitrogen oxide, and I'm not a scientist, I haven't looked too deep into this. I don't think coal burns off nitrogen oxide, but I'm probably wrong with that. The letter details a litany of public health impacts from this pollution, including asthma attacks, headaches, nausea, dizziness, links to reproduction and central nervous system harm, and some other causes premature death. As the letter details, the most vulnerable members of our community, including infants and children, older adults, individuals with respiratory and cardiovascular disease or diabetics, and individuals with lower incomes are most at risk. And that's just how things go. Usually the lower income or the most vulnerable being the infants, children, and the older adults. This is just a common trend whenever anything happens. Like, the most vulnerable are always at risk. But yeah, when it comes to the burning of biomass, most of the stuff should have been seen beforehand, and most of us just thought the trade-off would be fine, but apparently it's causing a lot more harm. And that kind of brings up the question, like when you burn things like corn and stuff, how much of the soot and ashes are in the air now compared to the trade-off when it's just coal? Again, if you know what coal burns off, it might be a bit less in terms of what gets floating around in the air. But that's what I want to talk about in terms of the biomass area. Let's see. Yeah, but it's not totally green. The renewable energy is lauded as clean, the answer to the threat of climate change. Not all renewable energy is actually green. Biomass has historically been considered a carbon neutral energy source, meaning carbon emitted or balanced. It is presumed that the carbon captured in trees is the same as carbon released through combustion, but increasingly research into these claims has shown otherwise. It's found that biomass combustion burning produces 1.5 times more CO2 than fossil fuels on a per unit basis, and you can kind of see that when you look at the two. It's like when you burn a tree, you have, like we mentioned before, the soot and other stuff being released, but you're also getting rid of the tree itself, the thing that was taking in the carbon dioxide through that balancing act. Whereas with the fossil fuel, it's kind of a liquid. I think it produces some heavier gases, but the thing is though, you still have the tree. You don't need to wait like 25 years in order to have that tree replaced. You have the plants, like the corn, that can be used for other stuff. So those things are still pulling in the CO2 rather than, again, trying to do that whole balancing act. Partnership for Policy Integrity notes that under the Clean Air Act, biomass power plants can emit 250% of the pollution of a coal plant before permits are required, even though these sources emit many of the same toxins. Okay, so we have our answer there. So coal and the biomass, in terms of when you burn it, it's all the same thing. It's just that it produces 250. Okay. I don't know who's writing this down, but there's got to be something more to this, because it probably depends on like what types of plants you're burning in order to do that part. Anyways, let's see. Next part I wanted to get on to was, I think nuclear is pretty self-explanatory. As I said before, it is very clean, very dangerous if something goes wrong. But then they also talk about solar. And there's also this weird thing is like electricity generation needs to be decarbonized before 2050 with renewable energy the most promising option. Not going to these articles, but again, I don't know if enough research has been done into it, but right now we can see that biomass may be worse or the same as coal, which is kind of disappointing. I had high hopes for biomass energy. Anyways, I know most of us are kind of thinking solar might be the way to go, but a couple problems with solar. One, solar relies on the sun, which is, depending on where you live, could be between 6 hours out to 16 hours out. That might be a stretch on that last one there. Let's see, solar energy in the environment. Yeah, solar energy systems do not produce air pollution or greenhouse gases. Yeah, because it's creating the heat in itself. I think that's how it's supposed to be doing. Using solar energy can have a positive indirect effect on the environment when solar energy replaces or reduces the use of other energy sources that have larger effects on the environment. However, some toxic materials and chemicals are used to make the photovoltaic cells that convert sunlight into electricity. Some solar thermal systems use potentially hazardous fluids to transfer heat. Leaks of these materials could be harmful to the environment. U.S. environmental laws regulate the use and disposal of these types of materials. As with any type of power plant, large solar power plants can affect the environment near their locations. Clearing the land for construction and the placement of the power plant may have long-term effects on the habitat and native plants and animals. Some solar power plants may require water for cleaning solar collectors and concentrators, or for cooling turbine generators. So there's a bunch of different factors that nobody really knew about that are starting to come to light here. Let's see, when was this article written? Yeah, September 2020. Really recently, actually, or at least updated. So using large volumes of groundwater or surface water for cleaning collectors in some arid locations may affect the ecosystems that depend on these water resources. Yeah. See, this is a big this is a big problem when you talk about groundwater or surface water. Things drink this. It's not like it's hidden from the rest of the world in this secluded let's say groundwater. Yeah, so it was. In addition, the beam of concentrated sunlight a solar power tower creates can kill birds and insects that fly into the beam. Okay, so it's basically like a magnifying glass when it shoots off. It's doing some of it is concentrated, and out of the heat, I'm guessing just the concentrated heat is killing some of the animals here. Okay, so that's it for the environmental impact. Yeah, why do they produce so much toxic waste? This is written back in 2018 of May. Last few years have seen growing concerns over what happens to solar panels at the end of their life cycle. Consider the following statements. The power of solar panel disposal will explode with full force in 2 or 3 decades and wreck the environment. Probably has to do with the chemical mix we read in the previous article there, because it is a huge amount of waste and they are not easy to recycle. Makes sense. I think later on we'll see that. The reality is that there is a problem now, and it's only going to get larger, expanding as rapidly as the PV industry expanded 10 years ago. Contrary to previous assumptions, pollutants such as lead or carcinogenic cadmium can be almost completely washed out of the fragments of solar modules over a period of several months, for example, by rainwater. So basically what we're backing up what the previous article was saying before, that these things are getting into the groundwater and surface water. Were these statements made by the right-wing heritage? See above. With 3 environmental journalists willing to report on much of anything other than the good news about renewables, it's been left to environmental scientists and solar industry leaders to raise the alarm. Okay, trouble with solar waste. It's estimated that there was about 250 metric tons of solar panel waste in the world at the end of the year. How much did they make? Let's see. This amount could reach 78 million metric tons by 2050, so in just 30 years. Solar panels often contain lead, cadmium, and other toxic chemicals that cannot be removed without breaking apart the entire panel. So basically, once lifespan's over, you can't easily remove it. I guess how it's built is, I think most solar panels are built tightly sealed, so they're going to be a pain, and they're very delicate from what I heard. Approximately 90% of the PV modules are made up of glass. However, this glass often cannot be recycled as float glass due to impurities. Okay, so yeah, solar panel glass is made of different materials than from, I'm guessing, your average window. See, common problematic impurities in glass includes plastics, lead, cadmium, and antimony? I don't know if I pronounced that right. See, research with the Electric Power Research Institute undertook a study for U.S. solar-owning utilities to plan for end-of-life and concluded that solar panel disposal in regular landfills is not recommended in case modules break and toxic materials leach into the soil. And also disposal is potentially a major issue. And to think the dumps in my area are already an issue. The end of the life cycle. So the California Department of Toxic Substance Control, which is implementing new regulations, held a meeting last August with solar and waste industry representatives to discuss how to deal with the issue of solar waste. At the meeting, it would be difficult to test to determine whether a solar panel being removed would be classified as hazardous waste or not. Okay, you get the idea. There's a lot of things are starting to come up. And this kind of brings into question of how much of this like green idea is just people's head in the clouds. Do they understand what goes into these solar panels? What happens with hydro dams? Because I know that when a dam is built, everything behind it gets flooded. I think we all know that. When you just need to look at a beaver dam. And yeah, like solar panels, pretty expensive to build. And wind turbine. Yeah. That's all I got for this one. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I found while just kind of looking into this and just figuring out. Again, I don't know why the politicians are putting so much concern on this. I'm not saying that we shouldn't worry about what we're outputting. It's just that the degrees when it comes to Canada's like industries, is it worth it? Because we have nothing, we don't have enough to replace, what is it? Right now, I don't think we have enough to replace the 30%. And with that new information I just read to you guys, like, we would have to create a lot of biomass or start working on nuclear energy, but make sure that these things are in the safest places possible. Because that nuclear plant goes, whew, that entire area, unusable for the next 30 or 50 years. I don't know how long nuclear radiation takes before things start to settle down.